Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you are joining this webinar from. I welcome you all to this webinar on pediatric cardiac surgery by Dr. Benedict and Dr. Srinath Reddy. Before we start, let us have some ground rules. We know that everyone is busy, so we would like to have a productive session to the benefit of all. The presentation will be around 35 to 45 minutes and it will be done by both Dr. Benedict and Dr. Srinath. It will be followed by a Q&A session for around 25 minutes. So the total session will be for an hour. In order to reduce the background noise, I will be keeping all the mics off, of all the people mics off. Anyone who wants to ask a question after the presentation, they can type it in the chat, and I will read it out. If we do not get time to answer all the questions, then you can type out the questions in the chat and then we will email it over to you. And also, just for the information of all, this is being recorded and hopefully everybody is agreeable to that. So we will start it from here. Thank you.
What is pediatric cardiac surgery? It is the surgical treatment of heart disease in children. They can be done across a variety of ages, and the age at which we treat depends on the condition and not on the risk to the patient. The timing of surgery should be done at such a way that the risk to the patient should be minimal. There are many treatment options, and what treatment option is best based on our technology will be offered, and most centers all over the world are at around the same level because all surgeons and cardiologists now have reached such a high level of expertise. Now coming to my second part of the session, lots of patients come to us with lots of issues. And when we are discussing the condition with the relatives and the patients, they ask us several questions. What are the common concerns? What are the common questions we are asked? What parents have asked me in the past when we take the child for surgery? The first question always is, will my child be okay? Statistics says that over the past 10 years, the results have become so good that only about 3% of children are lost to treatment, which means we have a 97% success. It varies between 95 and 98 in different centers, but I think it is a great number to be reached. Very often these numbers vary because of the case mix. Some centers do more complex cases, they may have higher mortality. Some centers are unable to do complex cases and may have better mortality. How long does the operation take? Operations take anywhere between 3 and 6 hours, and some challenging operations take much longer. It doesn't matter how long we need to do the surgery for, as long as it's done well. The cost of a cardiac surgery is surprisingly as varied as the cultures we live in. For example, an operation that we do for $40,000 US in Australia or $500,000 in the US would cost 1/10 as much in India. And that is because of several reasons. And this is the same if you need to get operated in any of the South Asian countries. Well, of course, setting aside Singapore or Malaysia. And then the parents ask us, they've heard the term hole in the heart, but how many holes are there? How many are you going to close? So we need to make sure the parents have understood where are the holes in the heart, what is the significance of each, and what we are going to close, how we are going to close, why we are going to close, or why we are going to leave open. Very rarely, we need to leave a small PFO or a small ASD behind after doing the complete surgery, and this is to help hasten recovery when there are pressure differences within the heart. It helps to overcome the pulmonary hypertension in the postoperative period, and in case the child goes for right ventricular failure. And for some operations, to enable mixing of blood, atrial septectomy is part of the surgery itself, in which case we are leaving behind a hole in the heart. But as far as possible, we try to correct the condition so totally that there are no residual defects. Will the child be fully normal? Well, that is our aim. So in curative operations, the children are usually sent home without any medicines, and after a period of about 2 months, they are permitted to go to school, participate in graded physical activities, and they can essentially grow into normal children. Several of our patients have gone on to playing sports. Some of them have grown up, got married, had children, and they've had no issues. Palliative conditions, on the other hand, they may have certain medicines going for them, blood thinners, for which the children may be prevented from playing contact sports. There are conditions where their exercise tolerance may be less. For example, in a child who's had a pulmonary valvotomy or an unguarded pulmonary valve, where the regurgitation across the valve may reduce the effort tolerance. But at a particular point of time in life, we are able to place a valve in that position. So if there are any newer residual defects that appear later in life, because we will be following up the child, we can pick up those defects and we can offer treatment for that, so that all these children have as fully normal life as possible. And why are we discussing all these things? Because we do understand that there are risks in heart surgery. For example, in any surgery, there is no surgery without risk. These risks happen because of several reasons. It can be because of the hemodynamic changes of anesthesia, drug allergies. When the heart is struggling and you're given anesthesia, the heart function can decrease and you can have low cardiac output. So we have to protect against that. There can be bleeding after surgery. Bleeding leads to blood transfusion. Blood transfusion can cause its own issues, one of them being transfusion-related acute lung injury. Whenever you do a cut on the body, there can be infection. Systemic inflammation, multiple organ dysfunction, air embolism, tamponade, anything that can happen has a possibility of happening. It is our duty to look after the child so that none of these problems happen and we are able to prevent them all. And if something happens, we are able to tackle them and we are prepared for it. In our country, the relatives are expected to bring blood donors, and this is to help the blood bank have sufficient blood on rotation. So our normal request is for 3 donors, and the blood that's collected is separated so that we have 3 units of packed red blood cells, 3 units of fresh frozen plasma, and 3 units of platelets. Because now the whole blood transfusion concept is gone, we use only components for transfusion. And because of the advancements in our techniques, we have been able to avoid blood transfusion in most children over the weight of 20 kilos. In spite of that, the mean consumption of blood is only 110 mils per case, which is a significant achievement. And with improving instrumentation, we should be able to get better. And why do we want to reduce blood exposure? Because blood is a tissue and a tissue from another human being. So there will be some degree of interaction and we would like to avoid that as far as possible. Most children are cured by a single operation, but if a patient needs 4, 5, 6 operations, that's fine. The technology and the techniques to do these surgeries are available and we can deliver these procedures very successfully. It does not matter. So to close the holes, like I showed in the previous 2 pictures, we can use a Dacron patch, which is a polyester patch. We can use the patient's own tissue, which is called pericardium, or we can use pericardium, which is commercially available from bovine pericardium, or we can use polytetrafluoroethylene patches. Sometimes to bridge a gap between the heart and the lungs, we need a conduit, and a conduit can either be a homograft, which is taken from a donor heart after somebody has passed away, or it can be using a commercial tube that is obtained from the cow, and that's known as a bovine jugular vein conduit. So once the surgery has happened, we come, sit down, and we explain to the relatives about how the surgery went on. If there are any complications, we make sure that it is informed, documented, and explained to them, and all the efforts being taken to resolve any side effects because of those complications. And once a child gets better, the parents would like to immediately know how soon we would shift to the ward. In our ICU, the average ICU stay is about 2 to 4 days. And this is because we would like the parents to become comfortable in seeing that they're able to manage their child well in the wards on their own. The next question is, will my next child have heart disease? I do not want you to read through all this data, and that's why so many letters, so many sentences, so many lines on the slide. But the one thing I would like to highlight to you is the one in red. If one child has got heart disease, there is only a small 2.5% chance of the child, the next child having a heart disease, which means if the parents are going to have another 39 children, only one child is going to have heart disease. So there's a very small probability. So I suggest that the parents do not worry about it and go ahead with having another child. And once all this is done, they would like to know how often they have to travel back to our hospital to get reviewed, because this is a major procedure that's happened on the child. If our patients live very close to our place of work, we ask them to come after 1 or 1.5 months if they're very complex operations. They're very straightforward surgeries where children are doing very well. We ask them to come after 3 months. When the patients come for review, a clinical examination, an X-ray chest, an ECG, and a detailed echo are done by our regular pediatric cardiologist. And then we review everything together and we let them know when they have got to come next. And that's usually at 6 months and 1 year, and then every year after that. But whenever necessary, if the patient needs us to see them, we are happy to see them. This brings in the question, what to do if the patient is from across the seas, if they are from abroad. The cardiologist in your city, the nearest pediatric cardiologist, will be able to do everything we have mentioned here, and they will be able to communicate with us. And that is what has become the norm with COVID now. We have a lot of telemedicine consultations going on. So we are happy to do a telemedicine consult and sort out your issues. And if your cardiologist has got an issue, we can always walk them through as to what the management of the condition has got to be, if there is any. We can reassure the cardiologist as well through a discussion. And then there are hundreds of other questions that just start coming, because now the parents have become relaxed and all the held back questions start falling out. They say, is it okay to lift the child? What if he falls down? We're not able to control him. What to do if the child cries? Do we have to do any dietary restrictions? Can she carry heavy school bags and go to school? Can she play games? Well, all this comes under the normal life. What to do if the child tries to be a normal child? Take it from us. Children are aware of their body much better than adults. If a child is running, it means the child is feeling comfortable to run. So I wouldn't be too worried. The sternum, which the central chest bone which we open for doing the open heart surgery, heals for a child between 6 and 8 weeks. And it's after that that I say it is okay for the child to attend school. At that time, the child will have a little bit of difficulty because it's been under rest for a long time. So the activity has got to be gradually increased to reach normal. For most children, we have stopped all drugs, and for some children who have been on medicines because the disease has only been palliated, we give them some caution. But otherwise, most children are happily playing by 8 to 10 weeks after surgery. The doctor in your own town, the regular pediatrician who diagnosed the condition, the pediatric cardiologist who diagnosed this condition, they are your first point of contact. You can go and follow up with them, and telemedicine brings us all close together. The cardiologist, like I said earlier, can talk to us, and if your pediatrician needs to talk to us, we can clarify any doubts that they may have. Immunization is a very important topic, especially in very small children as they are growing up. We have a schedule. Each country has got a schedule of vaccines to be given for a child. There is one piece of caution that we give our patients when we discharge them. The stress of surgery is very strong, which means a child, when it undergoes surgery, goes through so much stress, and the stress of surgery plus the stress of blood transfusion reduces the immune strength of the body for over a period of 1 to 1.5 months. During this period, vaccines should not be given. Once the 1.5 months period after surgery is over, the child is fully healthy. That is the time to restart the schedule which has been stopped. Let us say we have operated 9 months. You have finished all the vaccines until 9 months. The surgery is over. Wait for 1.5 months and then start the vaccines after the 1.5 months. And that will start from what you have completed, and you continue the schedule after that. Children are usually very small. They have not grown very well before they undergo treatment for their heart disease. And to catch up the weight, to grow and to try to catch up with the rest of the children of the same age may not be perfect. So let's not be over enthusiastic as to when we are going to expect our child to grow to full 100 percentile that other children have. So the last question that usually comes to us is, when will you discharge my baby? The child should recover from surgery. We should all be comfortable with the completeness of the repair. But the most important indication for us is to see that the mother smiling. She is the person who can feel that her child has recovered. Once the socioeconomic situation at home and the parents of the child are happy, we are ready to discharge the patient. But not without the entire team telling that they are all comfortable that the child can go home. This is our team at our hospital. From left, right, Dr. Srinath, Dr. Jyoti Prakash, Dr. Rajni, she's another surgeon, that's me. And this is Dr. Vasudev, our third pediatric cardiologist. So we got 1, 2, 3 cardiologists and 2 surgeons on our team. We've got about 20 nurses. And like I tell my friends, pediatric cardiac surgery is like a football game. We all run after one ball, and that's the health of the child undergoing treatment. Have I missed out any questions? Have parents of patients asked you any questions? Do you have any? Thank you for participating. And I would like to show you a few photographs of some of our patients. The boy who's dancing there, he's just 3 days after surgery. So some of them recover very fast. So thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to working with you. Over to Dr. Srinath.
So thank you, Dr. Benedict. And it was a really interesting one. And even to a layman like me who doesn't understand about cardiac surgery and things like that, you made it very simple. So we have seen the hero's part, but there is a director who comes behind him, and the director is the one who actually runs the entire movie. So that is Dr. Srinath. So, and incidentally, Dr. Srinath has also started a big hospital. It's a 300-bedded hospital, and we wish him best of luck. Thank you, doctor. Please take over.
Yeah.
You can start presenting. Dr. Benedict, can you stop your presentation if you don't mind?
Sir,
I've stopped presenting, yeah.
We would go into the question answer sessions. Any questions like that?
I have not got any questions till now. If anyone has a question, can you please type it out in the chat so that we can put it to the doctors? And in the meantime, Dr. Srinath Reddy will be setting up. And while he's setting up, Dr. Benedict, I have a quick question. You are telling that India is much more economical than the other countries. Can you just explain how is it that India is more economical than the other countries? So while Dr. Srinath is setting up, and what is the success difference? Is there, I pay more in US, is the quality of output different or the quality of the surgery different? So if you can explain that, it would be awesome.
Thank you for this question, Mr. Ashok. It is a very valid question, and people often think that when you pay more, you get better quality. Well, to a certain extent, you can think on those lines. You're not wrong, but democratization of healthcare has happened to such a great extent, and India is very unique that it was a non-aligned movement for a long time. The government has opened up our markets to foreign investment, and so many small things that have happened. Education is widely available, and all this is translated into a lot of doctors who had gone abroad for training. They came back to India and they brought all this expertise. And from the years around 1990, cardiac surgery started growing in India. And by 2000, there were a lot of centers doing very good work. And cardiac surgery being a high complex specialty, the quality of work has been on par because people who came from abroad, they maintained their quality. And the people of India have been fortunate to be able to support these programs through out-of-pocket expenses. And the financial situation was that we had to keep the cost down. And being an open market, the competition between hospitals kept the cost down, and only the best centers could survive. So through mutual hand-holding, support, and training, the free flow of knowledge, we have been able to provide excellent results. And for example, the last 3 centers we have worked in, myself and Dr. Srinath, our results have been assessed and audited by Children's Heartland, and our data show that we are among the on par with the Western hospitals. And the cost of healthcare in India is low because we have a huge patient load, and the economy of numbers helps us increase our efficiency to such a level that we're able to keep the cost down. So that is one of the most important things. And of course, the competition between hospitals, the patients are free to choose where they have to go to. So we cannot raise our prices, and they're therefore very economical. And India is definitely on the cutting edge of technology as well.
Thank you, Doctor.
I hope that answered.
Yeah, thanks, Doctor. Yeah, it does answer. There were a couple of other questions which I will go through once Dr. Srinath has finished his presentation.
Can you see my slides?
It came out, yeah. If you can go to slideshow, then yeah. If you go to the slideshow, Doctor, we can see the full slide. Now we see yes, Doctor.
Yeah, there is, I think it's not going into the slideshow. That's fine.
No problem.
Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, sir. You are audible.
So, Dr. Benedict, he has spoken about his whatever our experience and what we do with children. Predominantly, sir covered about surgical aspects, and also he did touch upon few what we do. So what we generally do in the cath lab is what you see on what we say as a transcatheter closures of defects. We can do a transcatheter atrial septal defect closure, PDA closure in the cath lab. We do a ventricular septal defect closures. We do outflow obstructive lesion that can be opened in the cath lab, balloon pulmonary valvotomy, balloon aortic valvotomy. Coarctation, a part of a coarctation aorta can be stented. Duct dependent lesions, so those cases are called as a PDA, those can be stented and more complex intervention. And on the right side are the ones which the cardiac surgeons, our lead pediatric cardiac surgeon, Dr. Benedict, and who performs this difficult type of this thing. So in the cath lab, as a cardiologist, what we do, we can do a transcatheter atrial septal defect closure. What is it? Is not all ASDs, mind you, can be closed in the cath lab. Few of them, that is, there are a category group of surgeries called ostium secundum type of ASDs, which is a centrally located defect. Okay, this type of ostium secundum ASDs can be closed in the cath lab, actually. Okay. with the help of this device called, it's a self-centric Amplatzer device, which what you can see on the right side of our screen. Okay, it has got a central waist and a LA disc and the RA disc, which can be delivered. So how you do it? We do it in the cath lab. We go from the right femoral vein axis. Here we can see the device being deployed. So this is in the cath lab, a fluoroscopy of a defect, ASD being closed. Okay, this is a quite common procedure which we do it. We do about every month, about 40 to 50 procedures every month are being done for a transcatheter ASD closure. What we do is most of the children, the advantage of doing a transcatheter closure is it's a short stay in the hospital. They need not stay longer, and you do a procedure today and they get discharged the next day. As we start doing more and more cases, we started doing these more difficult cases and a very large defects or a larger defects. If we think we can safely do it, we are doing such procedures and in the cath lab. So after device closure, if you look at the fluoroscopy, this is how, or if you take an X-ray, you would see after the device is released, it is a central device which is there in the lab. So what is the advantage? That's what I said. It's just an overnight stay in the hospital, and the child is discharged on an antiplatelet drug for 6 months, and the child can resume activities and they can go back to school. So people can ask, can the child fly back? Yes, definitely. Within 3 to 5 days, they can fly back. They are free to fly in the system. Similarly, we can close transcatheter PDAs. PDA closures are also done. About 80 to 90% of the ductus arteriosus, we close them in the cath lab by doing an angiogram and putting a plug, the device plug, as you can see. This is in the lateral view. We are deploying the plug inside the device, inside the heart. Right? Similarly, few ventricular septal, the holes in the lower, not all, most of the times, this is the procedure where we would take the surgeon's help. So most of the children with ventricular septal defects are generally symptomatic early. So we would not take a child less than 5 kg or less than 8 kg into the cath lab for closing a defect. It's only the older children where we are sure the arteries or the veins, we can do it safely without damaging the artery or a vein. If we can do it safely, then only we would do. Otherwise, I'm happy to send the child to the surgeon for closure. Sometimes we can get some very complex, very difficult situations. For example, we got a 10-day-old child who had presented with multi-organ dysfunction with a severe metabolic acidosis. That child had what it was a significant critical coarctation of aorta. This significant critical coarctation of aorta was there. So as you can see, okay, this was a newborn baby, 10-day-old with severe ventricular dysfunction. Okay, so we put in catheter, and the child was not very fit for surgery. He had multi-organ dysfunction. So transiently, we opened up this coarctation. The child recovered very soon, and within 4 days, he was smiling. Okay, but we had placed a stent, which is not good. So for the growing metal, few months later, actually, Dr. Benedict removed the stent and operated, and the child is doing well. Similarly, pulmonary valvotomy, severe valvular pulmonary stenosis. We open up the pulmonary valve, the closed pulmonary valves, with the help of these small Ty-Shak mini balloons which go across this thing. This is a critical aortic stenosis, an angiogram showing a critical aortic stenosis where you can see the aortic valve is just opening like a pinpoint. It's just 2 to 3 millimeters. The child had severe ventricular dysfunction, this child. So they went across, put in a balloon, opened up the valve, and the valve is opening well. Another example where a newborn was stuck on the ventilator and the child was on heart failure. This turned out to be a Shimitar syndrome with a collateral from the descending aorta. The collaterals were closed with the help of coils. Older patients with significant coarctation, adult patients, we can do this stenting of coarctation and all that. Similarly, If you have, we do other structural interventions for patent foramen ovale for those patients who are having cryptogenic stroke. Okay, and there is a select group of patients whom you think the PFO is patent causing embolic stroke. Those people benefit with this help of a device similar, like it looks like an ASD device, except that the left atrial disc is larger than is smaller than the right atrial disc. Another procedure which we can do in the cath lab is the left atrial appendage closure. The left atrial appendage closure is done for very few indications where patients have non-valvular atrial fibrillation and those patients who are at increased risk of stroke. So what we do is the left atrial appendage, there could be it is a nidus for a stroke, for a thrombus formation, thus leading to stroke. So you want to remove that, exclude it, so you put an appendage, a block. Post-MI, this is a little complex, this thing, post-MI myocardial infarction, VSR, ventricular septal rupture, that can be closed in the cath lab using a device. This is an example of of an older adult who had a VSD, and later on he had a rupture of sinus of Valsalva. That sinus has given up. That was closed in the cath lab with the help of a device. So transcatheter closure of a rupture of sinus of Valsalva can also be done in this thing. Still older structural interventions, a little more complex, as what you can see an iotogram in a 57-year-old who presented to the emergency with absent lower limb pulses. As we did an iotogram which shows the aorta, complete tear in the aorta, complete that iotogram. So this man is, you can see, this is the false lumen and this is the true lumen. The true lumen is very less. So that was repaired with the help of an endovascular stent. This is also done in the cath lab, and we do take the surgeon's help to get accesses and if any emergency, so that immediately we can go on cardiopulmonary bypass. That patient was stented with the help of a stent graft. So the grafts the endovascular grafts would look like that. Similar other patients who had aneurysms of aorta and all, we can do. Transcatheter pulmonary valve for older patients who had underwent a tetralogy of fallow repair, who are having pulmonary regurgitation, we can do a transcatheter pulmonary valve implantation. There are different types of valves which have come. This is one type of a set of a valve. And just to recapitulate what our experience in the surgical field, what Dr. Benedict has already told. See, this is Dr. Benedict's hands. He's doing a neonatal arterial switch operation in a very small baby. As a small, the size of the heart of a small baby. It will be a size of a lemon. So Dr. Benedict is operating here, and so after his surgery, though you can see that this is a little one lying on the warmer. There are so many medications which the child is needing immediately after this thing. But appropriate management, and if you do it, most of these children, we have done arterial switches operations as young as 2 days in the second day of life, or a delayed arterial switch when the LV is regressed. Those patients also we can do. Similarly, a 4-day-old child or a newborn child with heart failure, previously missed that it was a heart emergency surgeries in the midnight. They might look sick, but within a week, these children are all just smiling back at us, giving this thing. So the right intervention at the right time will help all these children. Okay. Previously, there was a myth that we must have an adequate weight for a child to undergo a heart surgery, but that's not true right now. So the ideal age for some of the cardiac or the ideal indication would be an uncontrolled heart failure. So in our unit, we don't wait for a child to gain weight or something like that. We don't deny a child because the child doesn't have an appropriate weight. The only indication for going for a surgery would be in a large shunt, would be an uncontrolled heart failure. Then those children, we go out and this thing. So we have experience in ligating preterm pre-DA ligations. We do it on the bedside, extremely low birth weight, less than 1,000 grams. We have done quite a few. We have done pulmonary artery bandings in, I think one of the largest experiences Dr. Benedict has in successful doing a pulmonary artery banding in extremely low birth weight babies, less than 1,000 grams we have done. We have done even complex cardiac conditions where we have a corrected transposition, ventricular septal defect, pulmonary stenosis, those conditions also. Just, it might sound confusing, but it's almost like 3 to 4 operations in one go. Okay, minimal access surgery, smaller size incisions, mini incisions, and all that. So whatever it is, today what I would like to summarize is uncontrolled heart failure is an indication for any infant with large left to right shunt. That is, any infant with large left to right shunt is an indication for surgery. Age and weight, we should not consider it as a barriers. And with expertise and surgical correction can be performed with no incremental risk and very good optimal results.
So thank you very much, Doctor. We are done. We have a few questions here, so I thought that having only 10 more minutes left, if we can use that time, it will be highly appreciated. The first question comes from Jonali Chowdhury. What is the optimal time for Fontan surgery?
So, Benedict sir, you're taking? Shall I take?
Srinath, take it, please. Go ahead, Srinath. You take it.
Yeah. See, the optimal depends on the first. Before we go for the Fontan surgery, we have to evaluate. We have to evaluate whether the child is fit for the surgery. So what we call it as a pre-Fontan evaluation. Okay. So once the child or is fit, once we decide that the child is fit for Fontan surgery, what is the optimal timing? So the timing is, there are different views. So the Japanese and the other data, they have done as young as 2 years and 3 years. Okay, but it all depends on what is the size of the conduit, the Fontan conduit, which we can place so that the child, when he grows to an older age, can be the child can be optimized without changing the conduit. So I would, in our center, we would do it at around 3 to 4 years of age. That's an ideal time.
Thank you.
I agree with Dr. Sri that if we get the numbers right and we do a good surgery, we will have very good results. And we have a person who was a patient on the thing now. And Mr. Ashok, if you would like to, there's one Mr. Apu George here.
Yeah.
And he can share his experience if we have any time in the last.
Okay, sure. We will do that. He has also asked a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So the next question, no, I'm going in order, doctor. The next question is, Fontan is like exchanging your blue motorcycle with a pink bicycle. Again, it is from Jonali. What do you say on the saying?
It's a good analogy. I agree that it is a mode of transport. You are moving forward. The best part is you're not stationary. You're moving. Whether you move slow or fast does not matter as long as the destination is the same. If you can enjoy your path, we do this Fontan to help the child have a very comfortable life. And at the end of the day, leading a full comfortable life is the aim if we cannot give it a full active life. So being pink is very essential because we are reducing the mixing of blood. And when we reduce mixing, the quality of the growth of the child, the mental development of the child, and so many other issues will be overcome. So having a pink bicycle, I think, is better than having a blue motorcycle. If it is possible, it should be done.
Thank you, doctor. There is a next question. Is there any technology or device that can use to detect hole in the heart in pregnancy?
Yeah, I will take that. Yes. So what we do? Yeah, we can detect congenital heart disease antenatally. So the ideal time for it, what we do is a fetal echocardiogram. A fetal echocardiogram is when the mother is pregnant. You look at examine the mother's womb, the baby's heart, and this is ideally done at 16 to 20 weeks. And in some countries, if the law permits, depends on the medical termination of pregnancy law. In our country, it is legal up to 20 weeks. So it's ideal to do a second trimester TIFA scan and a fetal echocardiogram. In the fetal echocardiogram, we look for any abnormalities in the heart. So about most forms of complex congenital heart disease can be made out, and in the fetal echocardiogram, the advantage of antenatal diagnosis of a fetal echocardiography is basically it can help prepare what is the type of lesion and whether the child would require an early intervention, whether and where the mother has to deliver. So suppose it was picked up at a XY center and that center doesn't have a neonatal cardiac services, that mother, it is safer for that mother to deliver in a center where there are appropriate neonatal and pediatric cardiac services. It is possible to do an antenatal diagnosis.
Okay, thank you very much, doctor. And this is the question from Apu George. How much is the risk of bleeding or other risk in surgery considering the age of the patient? If patient is old, then how much is the risk?
Any open heart surgery, there is a risk of bleeding because we are cutting through tissue. Every patient is given the maximum possible care to avoid bleeding right from the time we start the operation. And throughout the procedure, we make sure there's no unnecessary loss of blood at all. And that's why I told you, our average consumption of blood is only 110 ml of blood per child from admission to discharge. So that shows that we are able to reduce the quantity of blood used in all patients. I do agree, if a child is very blue, the blood bleeding and the blood's coagulation is not normal. So in that condition, they may have a little more bleeding than usual, but that's not something that we need to be worried about because we have medications, we have blood available for transfusion. This is not something that we can't handle.
I would like to add a thing about bleeding for older patient. I think Appu, he himself, there was a lot of bleeding in his post-operative period. Probably if the child is or a patient is blue for longer period, is a cyanotics, they have an abnormal coagulation profile generally. So those patients, because of their inherent this thing, they tend to bleed more. And also the risk of if there is a reduced sternotomy and those patients, because of a lot of adhesions, those patients also tend to bleed little more compared to others. So the risk of bleeding and blood loss is higher, sir. Do you agree with me, sir? Benedict, sir?
Yeah, the risk is there. But I'm just saying that we don't need to be worried about it because all the maximum care that needs to be done is taken.
Yeah. I think Appu got that question because he had bled a lot in the post-op period.
But he's doing well. He's a smart young man now.
He's more than 10 years.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Thank you, doctors. Yeah, so thanks, Appu, for sharing it. Dr. Musa has a question. How often, in your experience, tissue rejection with some of the graft materials you use in heart tissue of disease patients happen?
Okay, so the beauty about this is, Dr. Musa, the material technology has developed so greatly that we now know that materials we use are virtually not rejected at all. For example, PTFE, polytetrafluoroethylene, is a slippery substance known to man, and bacteria cannot stick on it, and it is very rare that it will get ever infected. One. So infection aside, the body does not recognize these inert materials and therefore does not reject these plastic materials that we use like PTFE or polyester. We use the bovine jugular vein graft for using a pulmonary artery conduit, and that graft is treated with glutaraldehyde. So glutaraldehyde is a substance that removes all antigens, all bacteria, virus, and fungus. It also crisscrossly knits, otherwise known as tanning. What you do to leather, similarly, this is done, and the tissue is made stronger. So not only are all the antigens removed, the body does not recognize this as a foreign body and therefore does not reject it. Additionally, this tissue is made up of only a scaffold of collagen. So the body's own tissues grow onto that, and that makes it into a tube filled with the patient's own cells, and therefore the chances of rejection are much less.
Thank you, doctor. Dr. Musa, if you have any more question, you can type it out. In the meantime, I'll go to the next question. I think we have time for 2 more questions. So Jonali's question is this: is waiting for Fontan as much as possible a good idea? Is there anything like a feasibility of age, or is there a maximum age limit?
Well, like Dr. Srinath said, we would like to operate earlier. About 3 to 5 years of age would be great. And if the pulmonary artery size has not grown adequately by the age of 5, or the pulmonary artery pressure has not decreased, then we have to wait longer, because the blood flow through a spontan conduit is because of pressure gradients. And if the pressure gradients are not acceptable, it is unwise to operate at any age. So waiting for the right pressure is not wrong, and there are lots of other alternatives also. So this forum is beyond the discussion for that. But I think when the numbers are good, we should go ahead for treatment. If not, we got to just wait and see.
Okay. Older the patient, higher the risk of Fontan surgery.
I agree.
Okay. So as a corollary to that, the same question, the same subject, how much PA pressure is okay for going to have Fontan, and how big should be the size of the PAs?
The size of the PA, I would like to have at least 10 mm each, and the pressure, lower the better. Around 10 would be great, but up to 14 would be okay, would be acceptable.
Okay. If there is any other question, please type it out, or if not, you can also send us an email at info@anavara.com. And again, as I told, if you have any questions, if you want a second opinion, Dr. Benedict and Dr. Srinath are always ready to take it. So I think we will sum it up here. If there is no more question.
Lastly, I can notice my friend Dr. Ibrahim Dalia here.
Yes.
How are you, Doc? Is there anything you would like to ask us?
You are on mute, Doctor. You are on mute, Dr. Ibrahim. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Benedict and Ashok and Srinath. No questions. Just to say, the presentation, the talk has been excellent, and I did pick a number of good things that will be utilized back home here. I'd also want to add that Benedict is a friend, a mentor, and a good teacher. He's been encouraging us here in Nigeria. So we are always available to collaborate with you and to learn from you. Thank you.
And you're welcome anytime to come visit us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. So thank you all for participating, and it was really encouraging that you took time off on a weekend to join us. And finally, my just request to you is, this has been COVID time, and we need to be very careful about the recommendations made by CDC and other institutions. Wear a face mask covering your nose and mouth when you go out. Try to avoid being in a crowded place, and if you have to, try to maintain a distance of 6 feet. Avoid shaking hands or physical contact. Wash your hands often, especially after coming in contact with new or unknown objects. Sneeze on your arms or wrist fully covered. So this is my humble request. Let us see that we can contribute a little to the prevention or to the propagation of COVID-19. Thank you, folks. Thank you again, one and all. Bye-bye. Thanks, doctors.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.